fixed here momentarily. There we go. Perfect. Now I can see you.
Okay.
All right.
Hola. You got me? You got my audio?
I do. So we're live. I'll get us kicked off.
What's up, everybody?
All right. Hold on. All right. Hey, everybody. Sorry about the minor technical difficulties getting fired off here. The joys of live broadcasting and all of those fun things. So how are all of y'all cool cats and kittens doing today? I've got Mr. Grant Kemp here today to discuss Subject 2 and the wonderful art of showing up to the property and figuring out what to do once you get there. So how you doing today, Mr. Grant?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on here. I'm excited about getting through this. This is one of our like FAQs that I get a bunch, and so I'm glad that we're going to get into it a little bit today because it is a admittedly confusing thing if you haven't gone through it and you just want to make sure that you're not messing things up. So we're gonna talk about what is the kind of order of operations, if you might, for getting a property contracted subject to. So I think, one of the big feedbacks that we got last week that a lot of people actually picked up on and commented on and that kind of stuff that I think is cool for y'all to have noticed is folks were talking about that was kind of new to them to think about introducing the idea of contracting the property before you even show up to the property, right? And so, Daniel, you mentioned it during the stream, and we had a couple of people kind of commenting on that during, but that's actually kind of step one. That's actually step one to making sure that your contracting process is going to go smoothly. And Daniel, do you remember what I'm referring to whenever I'm talking about that, like as far as being on the call before heading over to the house?
I do, and I really appreciated that because even with close to 12 years of experience, I'd never had anybody really express it that way. And what you were saying is while you were on the phone, you set the scene that contracts were to be signed at the appointment. So there wasn't like the impression that y'all were just going to show up and talk about it and then, make a decision from there. Like on the phone, you were like, so I just want to let you know, I got the contracts ready, and when we meet tonight, we'll go ahead and get them signed. And you really set the stage with that statement of, that's what the expectation should be when we get there today. I liked that.
Right, absolutely. And, and I think that's one of the huge parts that allows us to have a large contracting success rate is setting that standard. Here's kind of what I think about in negotiations in general. And this is going to be something that you're going to need to think about as you're contracting these houses subject to, is that, you guys are skilled and intelligent real estate investors who still don't know all the ins and outs of subject to. So how can we possibly anticipate for our seller to understand everything just right off the bat, right? I mean, that's one of the things that we need to be very hyper aware of, is that we're asking our seller to take a pretty big leap in knowledge, and they're not the ones who've been on live streams learning all about this, right? So we really need to think about the kind of stair-stepping of people can only kind of go so much further into their next step. I mean, it's not like you go to high school and they automatically put you into like advanced calculus, right? You got to kind of learn what arithmetic is and learn what algebra is, and then all of those things go into calculus. I actually have no idea because I never took calculus, but the idea here being we can't just expect leaps and bounds of knowledge to come all at once. So our job is to set the stage in such a way where we are creating a safe space for our seller to ask questions. We are helping them feel comfortable with every next step. And as I referred to last time, our sales in general is education. We're teaching them how to work with us. We're teaching them how we behave and how we work, and we're teaching them how this process is going to go. So you need to understand that sales is education, and teaching them that next step. First step of getting a good contract with subject to is when you talk to the seller, before you're on the touch where contracting is going to occur, you're going to introduce the fact that in that next touch, that contract is going to be the point of that conversation. And why I say touch is that, like we're buying virtually. We're not actually going to the houses. We're not actually going on these appointments to contract the house. But a lot of people are going to appointments to contract the house. Each time you get in front of a seller, I'm calling that a touch. And we kind of want to keep that in mind with marketing and all those kinds of things too. So step one, introduce, hey, the next time we talk, the point of this talk is going to be to get this thing under contract. The next step is that when you're at that sale, when you're at that conversation, when you're at that touch, all of the things that we talked about last week, right? Like all of the rapport building and all of that kind of stuff really matters. And the best thing for you to do, for you to have a successful transaction in this contracting, is what Chris Voss refers to as an accusation audit. Daniel, are you familiar with that term, the accusation audit? Are you familiar with what that's referring to?
I remember hearing it from reading the book. I read that book about a year and a half ago, but I don't remember it in that sense.
So the accusation audit is something that you can do going into a negotiation of some sort, where it's basically like you look for the things that you know that they're going to come back with, right? So if, for instance, Chris Voss was a hostage negotiator. And so, he might go into a situation knowing he's going to say, hey, I want you to let go of this hostage. And the other person is going to say, why should I trust you, right? I want you to let go of this hostage. If you do, I'll give you a hug. The hostage holder is going to say, well, why should I trust you? Well, Chris Voss knows that going into the negotiation, right? So he is going to change his presentation into something more along the lines of, hey, you should let go of this hostage and I'll give you a hug. And I just want you to know that I've been doing this for 30 years and I've never let somebody down. I've got a long-standing track record of actually giving hugs at the end of this. So you are addressing something that might be a concern of theirs down the road. Daniel, did you use that kind of thought process in your negotiations? Did you ever bring up something that you knew that they would have a problem with before they had a chance to do that?
Like I would do that from the start of my marketing. Like what I before I'd even start marketing pre-foreclosures, vacants, probates, those were the three pain points I marketed to the most. But before doing my marketing, I would brainstorm what the person wants, what they need, what their current situation is, how they got there. And I'd try to figure all of that out. And then through trying to figure all of that out, my goal was to determine, what their objections would be. And then when I'd start writing my marketing, I'd typically use long form copy. And through my long form copy, I would try to use my copy to overcome their objections before they even called me. Like, for instance, I didn't mind contracting subject to on low equity deals. So because of that, and I knew that other investors often couldn't do that, one of the primary things I'd put in my marketing up front in bold was, I can contract your property even if you owe less or more than what it's worth. Something along those lines. I'd use it a little more creatively, but that right there was an attempt to overcome an objection that I knew may already be present, and I wanted to do that in my marketing to increase my volume of calls.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to apply this. This is going to be one of those situations where there's the what people want and there's what people need, right? I think that, yes, we are talking about the 1, 2, 3, 4s of getting this stuff contracted. And I want you guys to understand that part of that is, yes, I want you to get this form signed at this point in time and send it to that person. Okay, so we're going to address that. But getting a good Sub2 contract signed is much more than which forms get signed and when. And I think that that's a big separator of those who are successful in the business and those who are not, is because we have to understand that our definitions of certain words are going to be different for us as they are for them, right? And so our definition of this experience is going to be different from us and them. So step one is to, introduce that the next touch is going to be when we're actually going to contract this property. And as a point out of this, philosophy that I'm talking about here of just different definitions, the reason we do that, as we pointed out last week, is that we may have shown up to that appointment, and in their mind, us showing up is, okay, they're going to show up and they're going to take a look at the house and take pictures. They'll go back and do their numbers and their magic. And then we'll probably have something where we can get to an agreement next week. I'm hoping that I can sign. So they're telling their friends and their family, like, yeah, they're going to come over tonight. I'll let you know next week how that goes. That's not what we think. What we think is, I'm showing up tonight, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to get a contract. So unless we have set that stage for them, the contract is less likely to occur, because then we show up and we are asking them to go straight from 2 + 2 = 4 to calculus, and they haven't had a chance to accept the, oh, whoa, so you're trying to contract it tonight. Okay, so that's, again, that's where you get the let me sleep on it kind of kickback.
I can't
when you're going
to
be contracting stuff, go ahead.
I can't stress how big of a nugget that was for me, because I'd never applied that. Whenever I was on the phone, I would get the appointment, and it wasn't common. But if I did go to the appointment, most of the time I would get the contract. But there was obviously plenty of times where I didn't, and I really feel like that setting the stage for what the intention of the appointment was prior to showing up to the appointment was a really big shift in my mind.
I'm glad, and that was picked up by a lot of people last week. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to set our foundation, is like, yeah, that's step one, right? So we need for them to understand the stair steps of the process. The step two is giving an accurate accusation audit. And it's not really an accusation audit, because the accusation audit is more kind of contextually from, because I'm referring to this as from Never Split the Difference, which I always say, like, I think 90% of Never Split the Difference, frankly, I think is kind of outdated information as far as how to negotiate personally. But that 10% has some like really solid nuggets in it, right? And this is one of those. Accusation audit, more contextually, was more like a, why should I trust you? I'm going to accuse you of something. You need to come back with it. But what I find success in doing is we're setting the stage of showing that we are the guide. We are the ones, we are the experts that are going to allow them to get where they want to go. And what better way to do that than for it to seem like we can read minds, right? Who in here, raise your digital hand with a like or an emoji or a, whatever. If you have a spouse or a significant other or a family member, and you've experienced those moments of just like, you expect me to just know that? You expect me to just read your mind on this? You know what I mean? Like, how many of us have run into that situation? How much more successful do you think you would be in those conversations with that person if you could read their mind? Now, the reason I bring that up and say it in that way is that we kind of get the opportunity to read these people's minds because we have been in this situation time and time again. And that's part of what we're going to be able to present in helping them to feel comfortable with us as their guide to getting them where they want to go, is if we can answer questions before they even think about needing to ask them. Okay. That is a huge part of getting your contract done well. And I think that one of the things that really slips most people up on this is not reading your contract before you go in there and not knowing your contract inside and out. If you get into a situation where you're going to go contract a house, you owe it to your seller or your buyer or whoever that might be. You owe it to them to have read every word about that contract and to have asked questions to whomever you need to ask, your attorney or whoever that might be, about certain fields in that contract, so that you know what they're signing, because you should never ask somebody to sign something that you are unwilling to sign, right? That would be, I have a problem with that. If you're not going to be willing to sign a contract that you're handing to somebody for reasons of feeling like, well, there's no way I would ever do that, I don't think that that's a good move to have. And so I think reading your contract ahead of time and being prepared to answer the questions is going to be huge for this. Daniel, what kind of contract? Were you the type that had like a little 1-page or 2-pager, or were you using the Trek contract? I don't remember, like when you contract, what are you using for your purchase contract?
I determined that based upon my seller themselves. So I actually did have a 2-page contract, and then I did have the Texas promulgated contract. So I had both, and I really determined which direction to go based upon the seller. Like if I was working with a seller that seemed intimidated, seemed nervous, seemed just uncomfortable, a 9-page Texas form seemed a little bit much, so I'd use my 2-page. But if I had somebody, like, I would often present the Texas form under the pretense of, like, when you purchased this house, this was the same purchase agreement that you used likely when you purchased this house. If you worked with a real estate agent, this would have been the exact same document you used at that time. So really depending upon the seller's attitude, depending on which one I would use, but I'd say probably 75+% of the time I'd use the Texas contract.
Yeah. And I agree wholeheartedly that I think that is I think that that's the best possible thing for you to do. Personally, I think using the Trek contract is the smartest way to go for similar reasons. Hey, look, yeah, it's a 9-page contract, but it gets very easy. And you'll see if you've watched the module that I have called How to K a Seller on creativecashflow.com or on propelio.com/academy, which is a free academy full of ridiculous information from ridiculously successful people that you definitely need to be taking advantage of. So go to propelio.com/academy if you have not watched through those modules yet, because there's, I mean, what do you have? I mean, you've got everything. You've got notes and Sub2 and property management, and did the mobile homes course got up there, right? Didn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What else, what are some other marquee people that are on that academy that people
Like
would
we've
love
got
to hear from?
think multifamily out there with the Kinneys. We've got out there. Wow, man, I can't even think of it right off the top of my head right now. We got Melody Medley teaching short sales. We've got you on that. We've got quite a
insurance,
few.
like James Jenkins on insurance. Like there's all kinds of crazy stuff out there, and it's free. It's legit free. So go check that out. Comment in here if you've gotten some advice from the Propelio Academy, and I'd love to know something that stuck out to you if you were in the Propelio Academy and learned from it. So I use the Trek 9-pager. And I think that part of it that you'll see in my How to Contract a Seller video, I think it's called How to K a Seller, because K is a legal abbreviation for contract, Latin. Why? I don't know. We start out, the first 9 pages, every seller in Texas is going to sign this sign this contract when they contracted their house, right? You probably signed this exact same contract when you bought this house. This is a state promulgated form that allows us to do the purchase and agreement. The next X amount of pages, this is the part that speaks specifically to the subject to portion of this sale, where I'm going to be continuing to make those payments on your behalf. There's a couple of things that are important about doing this. I personally am not a fan of the simple 1-pager, 2-pager contracts, unless you're just doing like a straight cash, like wholesale, whatever. And you've also legitimately had your attorney look over that 1-pager or 2-pager and tell you where your risks and exposure is. Just don't use it. There's too many people out there that give these little 1-pagers, and they're just not protective. It's just straight up, it's just not. So have your attorney look over that. But when we use a state promulgated form, this is also part of providing that comfort layer to your seller to understand, look, I'm using the same contract that like literally everybody in Texas uses, or literally everybody in Pennsylvania uses, or whatever that is, your state promulgated form, which shows a form of legitimacy to them, because we, remember, are introducing to them calculus when they've never even heard of calculus, right? It's not like they've heard of Sub2, they just don't understand it. They haven't even heard of Sub2. So if we're bringing them, a Sub2 addendum and this other contract that they've never heard of, and it's one that, by the way, my attorneys drafted for me, that can set off some red flags for them, and rightfully so. It would certainly set off red flags for me. But when we're presenting on, hey, the purchase agreement is actually the state promulgated form, everybody signs this one, this is done by the state, and then the addendum is going to go into subject to, it lends some credibility to your pitch, it lends some credibility to what you're doing, and it gives them some comfort level that you're getting some third-party input from something that other people are okay with, which is social proof and authority, right? These aspects of influence. So you go through that. Then you're going to introduce your subject to addendum, which, by the way, and I'm going to try and share. So I know part of the tech issue that we were running into right before this started was it wasn't showing my shared screen to you. So I'm going to test this. Daniel, let me know if this is showing up for you guys. If it's not, then does that show up? Does that share for you on the main screen?
I can see your desktop.
You see my desktop with the Academy, my mouse right here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So this right here is like the Creative Cashflow. If you're a member of Creative Cashflow, this is the Academy dashboard. We've got all the, the seller finance essentials, the Grant Teach Me Somethings. There's some exclusive stuff like our negotiations masterclass and rules of thumbs and stuff like that. But you're also going to have down here your downloads and resources. This is a new offering that Creative Cashflow has for everybody, which is we have the Sub2 addendum in a national format. Now, you will need to get your attorney to look over that. There is never a time that you should use a contract in your business that you have not had your attorney look over, but you can download the Sub2 addendums for it right from the Creative Cashflow dashboard, which will help you with this next part, right? So you've got your purchase agreement. Now you've got these contracts that you're going to jump into. If you know these contracts, you are going to know the things that they are going to have questions about. Okay, so they're going to have questions about, what do I do as far as getting another property? Like if I want to go buy another property, what's going to happen to me, right? they're not going to have the question of, but you do need to, or they won't have the question until you're reading through the contract with them. But you need to also have addressed the due on sale clause with them, which we just did a due on sale clause grant Teach Me Something a couple of weeks ago. So go ahead and watch that. There's also a due on sale clause script in the Creative Cashflow Academy and on Propelio.com. I did a script for you guys on video. They're going to want to have an answer about whose credit does this stay on? And they're going to want to have an answer on for how long should I anticipate this loan staying in my name, right? These are going to be things that are going to pop up in the middle of that contracting process. Here's what I want you guys to do is when you download the subject to addendum and you read it through, I want you to open a different document up and I want you to write down every question that crosses your mind as you're reading it. Because if that question crosses your mind, there's a decent chance it's going to cross their mind. And if it's not something that's going to cross their mind, you still need to figure out what the answer is, just in case. The reason I say all of this is before you start the process of actually contracting that house, you need to have already answered all of those questions in your negotiation process. So the way that I present that in contracting is I'm going to go through everything, make sure that all of their questions are answered. When I know that we're at a yes, and we are ready to sit down and get these contracts signed, that is the moment in time in which I'm going to say, okay, and I can pull up the contracts there and say, all right, so just before we get going into the contracting process of this, I did want to bring up the one risk that you have in this transaction, which is called the due on sale clause. And then we'll go into the due on sale clause speech from there and let them understand about that, because we want them to be comfortable about every aspect of the deal first, because there are so many crazy questions that they're going to have. And then we're going to present what is actually their risk so that they're already comfortable with everything else. Present them with what's actually their risk. Ask them if they have any questions based around that. Ask them if they have any more questions, and then say, all right, well, let's go ahead and jump in and get these things done. These first 9 pages or however many, everybody in Texas signs these. The next, I think ours is 18 pages or something like that, or 12 pages long. Frankly, I don't remember how many ours is. But like Scott Horn is a great, I always like, he's kind of the golden standard of closings and documents on this kind of stuff. So I always recommend you looking through him. His is 29 pages long, right? And then you say that is specifically on this. As you're reading through it, the big thing about you having addressed all these things before starting is that when you get to a difficult topic, like the due on sale clause, that is going to be in your contracts and disclosed, as it should be, because this is very important. This is where you get the chance to say, and here's the piece about the due on sale clause that we spoke about earlier today, right? That is massive. This is a huge part about getting this stuff contracted correctly, is because if you've already addressed, and every time you hit a point of possible contention, you can say, hey, and this is where it talks about the thing that you and I already had a discussion on, and point back to that. Y'all already discussed that. This gives your seller such an incredible comfort and trust in the process that's going through for you, because they're seeing, hey, Daniel did a really good job of making sure that I was comfortable with even the hardest parts of this before we even got into it. And it makes them much more comfortable with that actual signature process of going through that contract. Daniel, did you do anything similar to that? Does that ring a bell? I know you weren't, like we did the Sub2 deals together. So I was typically contracting those as a JV with you. But on your cash deals, was there something that you did similar to that, or was that kind of not applicable?
So like on my side, I always tried to have the contract signed before I got the contract out. My goal was essentially to have the yes before even presenting the paperwork, because the paperwork can be intimidating for anybody. Like even a lot of the people watching right now, when they're looking at their own contracts, they're a little intimidated by them. So I would go through and essentially have all of the known contention points of the contract addressed prior to presenting. And then once presented, I would go through the exact same thing that you just said. It's like, this is this, this is this, this is this. So that's how I would present it. And most of the time, my contracting aspect of it would only take maybe 2 to 3 minutes of the actual paperwork. But I would deal with probably 45 minutes of explaining the paperwork before I even presented it, so I could just really quickly go through it.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Obviously,
with that.
there were the occasional sellers that would want to read the entire thing, but out of 100 plus contracts that I've contracted, maybe only about 5 to 10 of them really wanted to read it. I mean, like I'd even suggest that they'd read it, and they're just like, no, I ain't reading that, and they'd just go. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but that was the truth.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you said that, because that was actually the next point that I wanted to bring up about this, is that I like ridiculously encourage our sellers to read these contracts. Again, I am the type who now when I close on deals, because we've typically got some we've got the attorneys that we like closing with and all that kind of stuff. But if I'm closing for the first time at a new title company or something like that, excuse me, I will read every single word of every single page of that contract or of those documents before signing on them. And you should too, by the way. If you are not reading every single word, you are really setting yourself up for a risk and a threat to your business. And that's something that I don't think enough people really appreciate, but is the truth, is that one of the biggest risks that you have is that if it's not in writing, it doesn't matter. And so if your written contract that you're, or closing documents is not as you expected it to be, that's on you. You need to figure that out. I just pulled up our contracts and they're 10 pages long. The addendum is 10 pages long on the exclusive creative cash flow versions. But basically, and that 10th page is literally only the signature pages or the seller and buyer signatures. So as you're going through that, you're referencing back, hey, this is the part where we talked about this. This is the part we talked about that. I'll have an exclusive video up on how to go through this contract with people. I don't want to spend time on that during this episode because we've got some more technicalities of just getting through this process from which forms to get signed and where to send. So we're going to get through that, and we're going to give them all of that information, and we're going to repeatedly ask them and tell them, hey, look, and this is how I present it to them. I say, look, I'm not that car salesman that just says sign here, 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 and here, and here. I want you to read these contracts, okay? And this is a script of mine. If you want to rewind this and you want to repeat this over, I would encourage that, right? Before we do these contracts, I'm going to say that, I want you to read these over. I want you to read every page. However, I understand that not everybody wants to read every page and every word. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to go through these contracts and I'm going to point out the things that I think are high points of them. Things that you need to understand about this contract, things that somebody might have pointed out as having questions, or things that are really important to get this getting done. As you'll notice, and I'll point out one of the pieces, like on the Trek form, it makes it really easy. Like this portion of this contract right here is talking about tidal waters, right? Like we're in the middle, like it's 600 miles to a piece of water, right? You're not going to worry about that, but everybody in Texas signs this, so I'll probably skip over that, but I am going to point things out. If you ever have a question about anything I'm saying, please stop me. I cannot encourage you enough to stop me and ask me that question, because I want you to have these answers. What we're doing is a long-term relationship between you and me. And in this relationship, there's a good likelihood that we're going to be in this relationship for the next 28 years, because that's how long is left on this loan. So I need you to be ultimately comfortable with everything going into this, so that you're fully understanding of everything that's going on, because it's super important to me to have well-informed sellers and not to have people that we got one over on, right? So I'm going to point out what I think. If you want to take the page and read it, I'm not going to guilt you on that at all. I got plenty of work. I can hop on my phone and read something if you want to read, or I can hop on my phone and get some stuff done. If you want to read through these contracts, please go ahead and do that. Okay?
I know whenever I first started, even on the Sub2 contracts, like I want them to read it because it's important. Like I don't want them to feel misinformed or caught by surprise. And that's why I would spend so much time prior to addressing the key pieces of the contract that I find important, like such as like my option period, my inspection clauses, if I have them, anything along those lines, the due on sale clause. So I would address all that prior to, and then when we'd go through the contract, when I first started contracting, every single contract I'd go through, I would personally go through paragraph by paragraph with my seller and explain it all. But as time progressed, I began to realize, because the sellers would flat out point it out, just like let's just go ahead and sign. Show me where to sign. I'm ready to get out of here. And it was ridiculous how many people just absolutely did not want to read it. And I couldn't believe that. So just like you, I would go through and try to point out the key things that would affect their position in the contract, such as anything that they had to perform on or anything that could directly affect them in a negative fashion. I would try to point it out for them, but the people would just, quite honestly, I'd only have maybe 5 to 10 out of over 100 contracts that truly wanted to read it. When they did, that was a happy relief for me, because it saved me the heartache of trying to get them to.
Right. And I would back that up. Like I have similarly, very rarely have I had somebody who actually wanted to read the whole thing. And the couple of times that I have, that popped up. the couple of times that I have had that happen, I've like praised them to the world's end of like, thank you for actually reading this. I think that this is very important for you. You know what I mean? So what I wanted to do here is just kind of quickly give you an overview of what these contracts are going to look like if you're using the creative cash flow ones. Again, I spent tons and tons and tons of money and time to get these contracts made up in a way that I felt I would be comfortable with for getting a contract, a Sub2 deal done. But you can kind of see the outline of it, what it is here. But part of what I wanted to point out is like, to the point of Daniel, what you said, like, I want you to understand this. Like, I went back to the attorneys and really made sure, like, I have a specific signature from seller and buyer on this, that we're aware the mortgages and deeds of the property described in this section contain provisions prohibiting the transfer of any interest of the property without satisfying the principal balance remaining on the underlying loans and or obtaining the lender's prior written consent, i.e. a due on sale clause. So when I get to that point of the contracting, this is what I'm talking about. Hey, this is where I was referring to the due on sale clause. Remember, you got a chance to talk. So there's a lot of stuff like that where we're being like super clear. They have to initial on every page. We're going to go through and kind of go paragraph by paragraph. Now, I do go paragraph by paragraph on the Sub2 form. Okay. On the addendum, I do point out a high point. I summarize for them what each of these paragraphs means, which is why it's so important for you to understand what these things mean so that you are not misrepresenting what that contract has to say, right? Now, the purchase agreement, I'm kind of taking high points on, but there you can see, like, that's basically the overview of what we're looking at here. So in that kind of stage, and I'm going to try here again to get back to where I can use our new fancy. Are you getting me on the screen with my camera now?
Yes, you just
okay,
cut over.
Good. All right. So, so that's kind of where we want to go. So now we've contracted them. Now we've got the contract signed with the TREC contract or your state promulgated purchase agreement and the Sub2 addendum. Again, I'm pointing out, I know that this is fairly obvious because I'm repeating it, but this Sub2 contract that I'm giving is intended to be an addendum to the purchase agreement you already have on your from your attorney. The second part of this is that you are going to need a power of attorney and you're going to need an authorization to release information from your seller. Now, the authorization to release information is going to be one of the things that you have downloaded from us as well. And I'm going to pull that up here for you guys also so that you can kind of get an outlook of what we've learned with this. Now, one of the big advantages that you guys have from learning from us, from getting the information from people who've done a bunch of these deals is that we are kind of frontline. We've done enough of these to understand what is and is not actually happening here. And part of that is that we've had to change our authorization to release information. Okay, so the authorization to release information had to be changed slightly because previously it just said, hey, I authorize you to talk to Daniel Moore's company and any of the employees, period. What we've been running into here lately is that a lot of these people that we got authorization signed for back in like 2012 and 13 and 14, now their banks are saying, well, that authorization is so old, we're not going to honor it anymore, which drives me insane. But it is what it is. So what I did is when we drafted this authorization for you, you'll see that one of the fields here is saying that we are authorizing the effective date of blank and shall remain in full effect without limitation until it's automatically revoked on blank. Okay. So what we're also putting into this is that when we say it's automatically revoked on the field, the date that you should be putting into that field is going to be the date of maturity on this loan you were buying Sub2. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to tell the bank that our seller is authorizing our ability to talk to this bank about anything going on from the date of contract to the maturity date of this loan. Now, will this really play out? I hope so. I think so. From what I understand on what I'm getting from the banks, it will. But we'll see, right? We'll know when we know. Now, this authorization is going to say, I, seller, authorize your company name, whatever company name that is that's buying. Again, I cannot stress enough, you guys do not purchase properties into your personal name, especially Sub2, but never do anything signed as your personal name. And to that degree, when you're signing your contract, it's going to be, your company name is the buyer or your company name is the seller. And when you sign, it isn't just Joe Investor. It's Joe Investor, comma, member, or Joe Investor, comma, manager. Okay. You are signing as a representative of this entity, because that is the whole point of having an LLC, is to have that shield legally between you and liability. And you only get that shield if you have personally not signed on anything. Okay. You have to sign as a representative of this company. I hope that really sits heavily for you guys, because it's very important to remember. So they are authorizing your company name here, and any subsequently. They are authorizing the bank, Carrington Mortgage, Wells Fargo, whoever. They are authorizing that, and any subsequently assigned mortgage holders or servicing companies. This is another thing from experience that we ran into, is we were getting an authorization release signed for whatever bank it was at, but then that bank sells the note years down the road, or the servicing is done by somebody else and they want a new authorization signed, and then it's just a pain in the rear. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to set up as many things right from the beginning to prevent having to reach back out to your seller and ask them to participate with anything, right? To ask them to say, hey, I need you to re-sign this, I need you to do this, because part of our pitch is what we're doing here is making it to where, yes, this thing is going to show up on your credit report, but unless the due on sale clause gets called, you should be able to wipe your hands and never have to think about this loan again. Okay, it's going to show up if you run your credit, but other than that, we should be taking care of everything, and that's why I need this authorization, and that's why I need this power of attorney. Okay, so we're going to authorize whatever mortgage company they're with, and subsequently assigned mortgage holders or servicing companies of the loan, to release all financial records and information to your company name. Okay, now we are calling that hereinafter a manager. That is how I'm presenting myself to the banks, is that we are managing this account for Mr. and Mrs. Seller, just because it's something that they just understand better. And again, we understand that the due on sale clause exists. And while we know that it's not necessarily if you do this, then we will, we just need to try to do our best to not flaunt things in front of them so heavily that we just kind of force their hand. I will tell you that I've been in some very high level meetings at a national and state scale inside of Capitol buildings, talking to people that are in control, who they've said, they're like, yeah, our banks know, right? Like I've been literally talking to like representatives of the entire banking, and our banks know what's going on. They are they get it. They do have the option to call it. Let's move on from there, right? Like we understand that they understand, and they understand that we understand that they understand, and there's a Princess Bride moment for you, but we just don't want to flaunt it, right? Because if we flaunt it, then they're going to have kind of their hand forced because of the issue of like kind of equal rights and just the litigious society that we're in. If they let you purchase this house Sub2, and they know that it's Sub2, and you flaunted it obviously in front of them, and they don't do something about it, but then they don't let somebody else do it, and that other person happens to be of a different whatever, race, class, whatever it might be, and that other person happens to be litigious, and that other person happens to understand that you got yours, they're setting themselves up for a lawsuit. It's kind of one of those things. If they approve somebody, they got to approve everybody, or they've got to make a policy that says who they will and won't do that with, and they're not going to want to do that. So we present as manager, okay? Now, this authorization to release is going to have the property address. It's going to have the account number listed. All of that has to be filled out. And then it does talk about the things that we have the right to talk about with them. And it authorizes for a certain period of time. This will allow the bank to talk to you, but it is not typically going to give you authorization to change anything, okay? That's where the power of attorney comes into play, which we are also going to try very hard to get signed at the time of original contract, but does not have to be signed until really the closing, okay? The issue with getting the power of attorney signed is that it does need to be notarized. A power of attorney needs to be notarized. Now, we do have on this one a notary block as well. So ideally, you are getting your authorization to release and your power of attorney notarized. But technically, the authorization release doesn't have to be notarized. So what kind of questions do we have up to this point? I think this is a good stopping point that transitions us between, okay, we just got contracted, we set the stage, we did our accusation audit, we got our purchase agreement. we got our addendum, we got our authorization to release, and if we could, because we were getting our authorization to release notarized anyway, we're going to go ahead and get our power of attorney signed, which, by the way, just as a quick aside, when you're at the contracting process and you're typically at their house doing this, for these notarized things, you can go to like a UPS store. FedEx does not do it. UPS does have notaries on site. I don't know about that. Or you can go to like a bank that they have an account with, and they will notarize these forms for them there. But it does require kind of picking up and going someplace to get that done. I understand that. You cannot notarize your own form. There is a conflict of interest there. And then the other caveat, the other FAQ that comes along with the power of attorney is that power of attorneys must be given to a natural person. In other words, you can't do a power of attorney to your company. You have to do a power of attorney to you personally, okay? So the extended portion of information on that power of attorney would be like when we get powers of attorney signed, I get a power of attorney signed from my seller to me, but I also get a power of attorney signed from my seller to my admin assistant. Now, my admin assistant literally has the logins to my personal accounts of money, is a signer on my bank accounts, okay? If you do not have a personal assistant or an admin assistant that you trust to that level, I literally sent my admin assistant my date of birth and my social security a few days ago, right? If you're not going to have that level of trust with your admin assistant or whoever else you're getting this notary or this power of attorney signed to, do not have your seller sign a power of attorney to them. You're setting yourself up for failure. We background check every one of our employees, and we have long-standing relationships of trust and proof of trust to where we have done in good faith our efforts to make sure that this person is worthy of having a power of attorney signed to them. The reason I do that is because, look, guys, I've been in this call for, I've been dealing, I had to get my audio. If y'all remember last week, my audio was cutting out. I finally found that answer, but it took me an hour to find that answer, right? So I did that before the stream. I'm here till 12:30. I've got a couple meetings after that. If something pops up with one of our sub-2s, I'm in these meetings. I can't go out and do anything with it, but my admin can. So she has power of attorney to deal with these things, but she also has power over my entire life, and I would not ask them to do anything otherwise. So this is a really good stopping split point between the initial contract and now, who do you send these documents to? When do you send them to? And what are you needing to request is going to be that next and final stage of accurately and correctly contracting and closing a sub-2 deal. What kind of questions do we have? Drop them in here. What kind of things are pointing out? If anything is stuck out to you, please, let us know in here. It's encouraging for us to know. We've got a couple of comments coming in YouTube. Like Eddie Beam says, Grant Daniel are bringing us these gems. We're crazy lucky, loving it. D. Williams, the Academy is amazing. Jocelyn says, we got another from Ryan Sovereigns. Hey, I love the Propelio Academy. I don't know where to start when it comes to the knowledge I've received. I gained a lot of knowledge from Grant Sub2 courses and still not the whole way through it. All the way, also the wholesale videos are invaluable. So I appreciate and I'm so truly grateful for what y'all put together that came on Facebook. Dude, that's awesome. Thank you guys so much. That's awesome. Daniel, do you have anything to chime in for? Or if anybody has questions, drop them in.
We had two questions come in. So one of them came in from Luis Vasquez, and he was asking, when signing contracts, how do you guys deal with Spanish-only speakers? So for those that don't know, Grant speaks fluent Spanish and speaks Spanish on a regular basis. So how do you deal with this, Mr. Grant Kemp?
Well, if I'm contracting a buyer, I know my very important Spanish words of pago aquí ahora. That is what I know. Pay me right here, right now. I'm joking. So this is a really good question, and it's funny because of the timing. Because I literally this morning, I would pull it up and show you, but it's worthless to do that. Literally this morning, a couple of hours ago, I sent a follow-up request to the attorneys that I drafted all of the Sub2 contracts with that are downloadable, asking for them to go ahead and draft something up for this specific situation for me. I had a question come in from one of our creative cash flow members, which prompted that. So this morning on Messenger, I got a question from, who was that? That was, well, it doesn't really matter. Oh, from Rita. Rita Shorefee is one of our creative cash flow members, asking basically the same question. Here's the problem is that if you speak English only, that's a trouble. And if, either way, these contracts are in English. Here's what we've seen a couple of things pop up on this. Legally, they started to pass a law that said, that everything, if the negotiations were done in Spanish, the contracting had to be done in Spanish and that kind of stuff. So that's important to understand. I actually sent off a request to my attorneys, and they're going to be drafting up an affidavit for us. Typically, what we have done is that we bring in our own translation. Historically, everybody in my organization speaks Spanish except for me. Now, that's not the case anymore. We've got more English-only speakers now, but that is partially because our acquisitions are primarily English. We have basically no acquisitions on the Spanish-only side, but dispositions is Spanish-only, and a lot of our a large majority of our our buyers are more comfortable in that language. So what we do is we always provide our translation, in the situation, or in the what's the word I'm looking for, in the transaction. But we always super encourage them to bring in their own translator as well. So what we've done historically is had an affidavit signed by them that says, yes, I had an opportunity to look over these with my own translator. This affidavit is in Spanish. With my own translator, I had the opportunity to do this, as well as have my own translator sit in with any negotiation, process that has occurred. And we are comfortable moving forward and holding harmless the seller or the buyer, i.e. you, for any issues that may arise out of translation issues, because we are aware of and agree that the seller / buyer, whoever you are, has done what's the word I'm looking for? They're not their due diligence, but in good faith, translated this in good faith, right? So we have that affidavit signed by them. So I'm actually getting that drafted up for you guys to include with this so that you can have a similar affidavit. But that's a really good question that should be signed. And that's a really good question that should be addressed too, of just, if you've got somebody who speaks Spanish and you speak English, you bring your translator, they bring their translator, and you need to, like, I can tell, I don't speak fluent Spanish. I'm half Mexican. I'm like 3/8 Mexican. My grandmother's maiden name is Torres, but I don't speak Spanish. But I do, however, I have been in enough of these contracting situations that I'm able to tell when a translator is and is not translating exactly what I say and how I say it. So when you start your relationship with your translator, you need to be very clear to them that you're going to say things that are going to be awkward and pointed, and that they need to not try to smooth the edges out. They need to say it in as high fidelity, exact translation of the words you are saying as humanly possible. And here's why. Because what will happen very commonly is, if you're starting a relationship with a translation, they are going to try to smooth something out, because we're going to talk very harshly about due on sale clause. Part of my job is to try to scare people away during the contracting, because if they know the worst case scenarios and they still stick with it, then we're in a good position, right? We're ready to move forward. So I'm going to be very pointed about, like, that means that your worst case scenario is that if this gets called and we don't have the ability to refinance out of that the worst case scenario here is a foreclosure that's going to hit your record, okay? And then you're going to wait for them to translate that. And a lot of times, if you don't have a good trusted relationship with that translator, they're going to try to smooth that out, because they're like, dang, Grant, that was harsh. And so they're going to try and say it smoothly because they want to get the sale done. And you've got to stop them and be like, no, that's not what I said. I need you to be harsh with this, because I need them to hear the harsh reality of it. And that's also why you need to encourage them to have their own translator available as well, which is typically a kid of theirs. It's typically one of their children speaks English and Spanish. And so they're able to sit into the translation. And so when we start that relationship, before entering the room, I'm going to set that up with my translator. Hey, I need you to translate the words I say. Do not try to smooth it out. I'm saying things harshly for a reason. It's going to be awkward for a reason, and I need you to trust me on this and say my words. When you step into the room, you're going to tell their translator, hey, this is going to be who's translating everything for us, because there's words, what you'll come to find, like things in owner financing and business Spanish is much different than like day-to-day speaking Spanish. And so there's going to be words that unless you kind of have them on the tip of your tongue, like surprisingly enough, like down payment. Like down payment is one of those words that Spanish speakers commonly don't really know. They might just say down payment in English, but it's enganche, right? Like things like that our translator may know. So we're going to tell our, the person on the other side, I would absolutely be happy for you to do all of the translation here. There's going to be a lot of words that are just kind of business Spanish that aren't necessarily front of mind. So if you have a question on anything that we're saying, please stop us. Please have us correct and clarify that for you. But the ideal situation here that we would like for it to happen is I'm going to speak They're going to translate for me. And I need you to double check everything that's being said so that you're ensuring that your dad hears what I'm saying through them. Okay. Does that make sense? Is that a good answer for you guys? You see where I'm going with that?
I think that was a great answer to that one. And I've got two other questions that come up, and let's see if we can hit those pretty quick. They
Yeah.
should be fairly straightforward. And then I'd like to recap on where we're at right now, because for those that are just now getting in, y'all have missed quite a bit, and I'd like to recap a little bit. And then I've got a couple personal questions I'd like to ask you. So I've got another question that came in from Santiago Luna, and he was saying, "Hey man, I've got a subject to under contract right now, but I don't have an LLC. I've got it under contract in my personal name. What should I do?"
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you don't have an LLC, frankly, I would really encourage you to JV with somebody who has an LLC or get an LLC filed real quick. Like LLCs do not take a long time to get filed. It's a few $100s depending on where you go. Like if you reach out to Tina at hornrealestatelaw.com, HORNE, Tina at hornrealestatelaw.com, tell her that I sent you. She runs a discounted rate for, friends of the family kind of thing. Also, I really like Matt Aycock. I've always liked Matt Aycock. If somebody wants to tag him in the chat there, it's M Aycock at Pratt, Pratt, Aycock, AYCOCK.com. Either one of those guys can get an LLC created for you. You're probably going to be looking at under $700, but you need to get that done. The amount of protection so far outweighs the cost of getting that done. I cannot stress enough. And I know Daniel and I have a little bit of a different view on LLC, but I think Daniel, do we agree on the importance of having that LLC in a sub-2? Or are you still just kind of a get it done however you can sort of outlook on that?
On my side, like, I'm not a lawyer. You need to consult with your own lawyers.
Course, yeah.
And I believe that most lawyers are going to tell you you're going to need an LLC for asset protection reasons. One of the things that I have found with most people that do start an LLC, though, they don't understand the corporate veil. They don't understand the additional requirements of annual meetings, meeting minutes, of keeping your assets segregated, all the things that are going to protect your veil. So in the long run, I see a lot of people that are uneducated on that side complicating their lives without really receiving the protections that they should receive. So beyond just asset protection, you're going to get taxation protection. So there's several things to look at from that standpoint. But if you don't educate yourself on all that stuff, the benefits are not going to be received. So you need to do more than just get an LLC filed. Otherwise, your corporate veil gets pierced and you're out of it. So my overall standing has historically been, if you don't have assets to protect, don't complicate your life. But when dealing with a transaction such as subject to, that I consider to be a long-term transaction, this isn't an in and out wholesale type of deal. This is a 20 to 30 year marriage that you're potentially agreeing to. Having a long-term strategy involved with that, which would be having an LLC, I consider to be important. But if you're wholesaling and things of that nature, you know what? Until you've got assets to protect, I'm not really down the path of get an LLC day one. I think that's busy work, and I don't like to say it that way. But unless you've spent the day or two to up your knowledge on corporate veils, taxation strategies, as well as all of the things that you need to do to keep yourself protected, it's really a pointless entity, especially as a single member entity. That's my own opinion, though.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. We have another question on, and so by the way, if you wanted to JV with me, I do JV with folks. You can go to creativecashflow.com/JV with me and submit your deal there, and you'll get a non-compete emailed to you automatically right away, showing that we won't just try to circumvent you or anything like that. You'll get a non-compete from me right away, and then my team will reach out to you within 24 hours to get things kind of helped out with. I do see another question from Sean Burke asking about where can we get the Sub2 addendum? Is it downloadable somewhere? And yeah, that is, going back to the answer there of, if you are a member of creativecashflow.com, that is where I, like I said, I spend a lot of time and a lot of money on getting these things available for you. So this is what when you log in at creativecashflow.com as a member, you will be taken to the Academy dashboard. And so at the very bottom of the dashboard is downloads and resources. And also on the hover over of the Academy, you can go to downloads and resources. And I made it the very top thing because it's what a lot of people are wanting to get right now. Click below for the downloadable Sub2 contracts. Click here, and that'll take you to the ability to download that. I would say pay attention because, again, you need to use your state's power of attorney. You need to seek state, local legal counsel on this kind of stuff. This is a really good base, but never use a contract that your lawyers haven't looked over for you first, right? So That's very important. I am running again. While we don't run, we're not a hey, we don't run discounts all the time. Like we're not a let's blow it out. Let's say it's going to be this, and it's always seller for that. But during the pandemic, while we know it's such a tough time on cash for everybody, we're trying to be considerate of that and running a 50% off in like spurts. Right now, the spurt that we're running is going to be if you use the discount code Sub2ME, SUB, the number 2ME, all caps. That'll get you 50% off if you do not already have membership. So you're looking at about $650 to get in, and we do have the addendum available for you there with the authorization release as well.
So Grant, anybody that's never seen creativecashflow.com, there's a valuable resource there. Grant has been my mentor for close to 5 or 6 years on anything creative financing, and then always just been a really solid ear to lean on anytime I've had personal questions, because his experience, as well as the experience of the people that he's surrounded himself with, is extremely high. So I've always looked forward to his input on not just real estate, but business in general. So I've always looked forward to that. So we've got right now close to 100 people watching across multiple different channels. For those that do not know, we run live both on Facebook and as well YouTube. So if you are watching on Facebook and you found out that, Facebook doesn't always notify you, and you do want to be notified when these types of things are happening, do look up Propelio on YouTube, smash and hit that subscribe button, and hit the notifications and say, show me every time Propelio goes live, so that way you can get access to this. We do try to go deep on the information. We've got a bunch of people liking this out right now, but if you could, hit us some more likes, hit us some more shares across the line over there on Facebook. Give us some hearts, give us some loves. If you hate what we did over here, give us some angry faces. Let me see at least one angry person today. Let me see somebody out there that didn't
I
like
hate
it.
how easy you're making this on me.
So going forward from there, man, though, let's recap real quick. So you're talking about, prefacing before we go to the appointment, making sure that we prep the scene for the seller, saying, hey guys, my intention of showing up to your property is to get the contract. So that way you've got that set up. And then once you get there, you've got your state purchase agreement and or your purchase agreement of choice. And you get that with an addendum. And your addendum is a subject to addendum. Your personal addendum, Grant, is about 10. The one I've been using, which was the one from Horn and Associates, was about 29 pages long. Massive amounts of disclosures, massive amounts of... I'm going to go ahead and key this out over here, though. Massive amounts of disclosures and information in those contracts. So moving forward from there, you also get your third-party authorization, so that way you as the buyer may speak with the banker, lender, or servicer on record to negotiate and speak on any of the nuances of the loan. And then you also go through and get your power of attorney signed. Now, the power of attorney does need to be, what would you call that? It does need to be
state, local,
notarized, and it needs
notarized.
to be per your state. So you either need to do that at the acquisition, which would be advised, but you could also get that done at purchase, at title and closing. Now further,
and state and local powers of attorney should be very easy for you to come by, because that's something that it's not just Sub2 specific. That's something that everybody's going to need a power of attorney for stuff. So that should be fairly easy for you to come by.
And then if we look beyond that, there was a couple of documents that I'm personally aware of that I've historically had to get, and I haven't heard you mention here. And I know that last time we spoke, your position on those documents has changed a little bit since whenever you were mentoring me originally back in the day. And that is the current insurance policy, as well as the original purchase paperwork, such as the original deed and the original security instrument, because some of the things that I'm aware of that is part of the due diligence of contracting is figuring out what type of loan terms were on file, such as, is this an arm? Is this a balloon? What type of loan was it? Because while the seller may or may not know, you need to, because I do not want to Sub2 a balloon due in 6 months.
Yep, absolutely. So that is actually the next step of what you need to get done. So the processing that we're doing here is very similar to kind of what you were talking about last week of look, I want to get a contract as quick as possible. My position on it is, unless I know that somebody is going to sign this contract with me, I do not want to waste time trying to research all this stuff that may not turn into a signed contract, right? So what I want you to get at some point in time, which I kind of, didn't put out there so far on this, And I don't know, the talking Grant Kemp little thing is like right over my face. I don't know if that's something that can get changed easily, it dragged off of the screen or not. But on the as we figure out more of our virtual streaming during COVID-19, on the stage where you're saying, hey, I'm going to come out and contract this deal, part of that is, hey, do you have a current mortgage statement available to look at that point? So if you listen to last week's where we did a reaction dissection of one of our phone calls where we contracted Sub2 over the phone, that would be a really good time to bring that up so that they have that available for you, because you need some of that information in here and in here, okay? Like the loan amount and the account number and the interest rate and all that kind of stuff. But what it doesn't tell you is what type of loan that is, right? And some of the information of like that is stuff that you will really need to know. So that's why it's really important to me that you do get, when we talk about what parts to get signed when, and I said, hey, you can get your power of attorney signed like at closing, but you do need this authorization to release signed at the contracting period, because what you're going to do immediately upon contracting this house is you are going to send the authorization to their bank. Okay. Now, part of sending this authorization to the bank is that it typically is going to take 48 hours for them to put that into play, where you can actually call back, or somebody from your company can call and get the information that you need. Now, the reason why I skipped over number 4 is that the best idea for you to do, especially if you need to move quick, because Sub2 works really well with like foreclosure leads that are going to foreclosure next week kind of thing, especially if you need to move really quick. Step 4 here is going to be, while you're at the appointment, you're going to call with your seller and get a verbal authorization. Okay. So what that means is that you're going to call Wells Fargo, you're going to call whoever with your seller on the line. Your seller's going to authenticate with them, because they ask the authenticating questions. What's your birthday? What's your social? Blah, 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 blah. And then you're going to take over. This is going to be a 3-way call because your seller doesn't know what's going on. So you need to help them through this. You are the guide, right? How many times I've talked about being the guide. The guide is the one who's strong and gets everything right. The hero is them, but the hero's broken and needs a guide, right? So you're going to take over for them. You're going to tell them, you're like, hey, we're going to call. I'll need you to authenticate the call with them so that they know that you're on the line. And then I can take over and tell them what we're looking for. They're going to ask you a yes or no question of if you agree with it. Just go ahead and say yes. And then we'll be able to get the information moving on this faster than anything else. And so what you're going to do is be on the 3-way with them. They're going to say, yeah, this is Jim Seller, birth date of whatever, whatever, whatever. And I'm actually going to pass the phone over to Grant here. So then you get on the phone and you say, hey there, my name's Grant. I'm with, whatever your company name is, 123 Buys Houses. Or actually, I wouldn't use 123 Buy Houses if that's your name. But, we're not trying to flaunt, right? So like our company name doesn't say Buy Houses in it or anything. I'm with Super Cool Guy LLC, and we're going to be managing this account for Mr. Jim. And he's just looking to give a verbal authorization to us so that we have the ability to kind of check up on what the most current loan terms are and get kind of that information of what's in the escrow account, those sorts of deals. So we're just calling to get a verbal authorization done. The representative at the bank is then going to ask Jim Seller, are you okay with authorizing, Super Cool Guy Buys Houses LLC, which I probably wouldn't put Buys Houses in the LLC if I'm using it at this stage again. It's just habit for me to say that. And your seller will say yes. That is an immediate authorization for you and your company and people that work for your company to call and get information, but it typically only lasts for a matter of days, okay? Up to like a week is usually what I see. So what we're doing here is we're setting you up to be able to get information from the bank immediately. You're then going to go immediately from leaving that appointment and send this authorization to release to that bank. So when you're on that call, you need to ask where to send a written auth, right? So you're getting the verbal authorization. You're going to say, I'm here with Mr. Jim, and he's also signed a written authorization of authorization to release information. Where would we need to send that for you guys to file that on his account? They're going to give you a fax number. They're going to give you, typically it's not going to be an email. Typically it is going to be a fax. So like I think I do myfax.com. It's like $10 a month or something to have a fax a fax line for you. And you need to also ask them Who for the attention line, okay? Because that matters too. Who do I need to make this written out with the attention to? So they will tell you that. You're gonna fax that to them immediately. It's gonna take 48 hours. When you have got that authorization, verbal, and you've asked that question, you've gotten that written down in your notes, that is when you're able to say, okay, thank you so much. You hang up, you tell your seller, congratulations, man. I'm so glad that you reached out to me. This is going to be really good for you. I appreciate working with you. I'm going to get to work making sure that everything is lined up at the bank the way that it needs to go. So I'm going to get back to the office. I'm going to send them this authorization, but we're also going to be requesting documents and stuff like that from them. At this point in time, you shouldn't have to do anything. Just kind of hang out until our closing date, which is whatever, 90 days away from now. And we'll stay in contact with you where we need, and you leave, you go back, and then you go to that step 5, you file that authorization to release with their bank. And when you do get back, go ahead.
So for some of my personal experience on that side is once you have faxed that authorization in, you need to be very diligent about following up, like probably once a day, and finding out if it has been imaged into their system. Because when you send it in, it goes into their fax machine and it ends up in a big pile of documents. And you're gonna need the loan number on there as a header, in my opinion. There needs to be a header on all documents you send in that includes the loan number and the seller's name and stuff. So that way, if the paperwork does get put in the wrong spot, they know exactly where it goes to, and that's each and every single page. And I call every day, at least once a day, and say, hey, was it imaged into the system? And if I get 2 to 3 days out and it hasn't been imaged into the system, I resend it. And I always, every time I do get on the phone, confirm where I was supposed to send it. Because when we're dealing with foreclosures, your time frame to get these things solved is not infinite. It is a very finite time frame that you have to work within. And I have had more than once a third-party authorization or any other document that I sent in for imaging not make it to where it was supposed to go. And if you wait 4 or 5 days to figure that out and you only had 10 days to deal with, you burned half your time dealing with that. So be very diligent on the follow-up with that. And I hate to cut y'all off on that side, but my experience says that can be a very big problem that needs to be addressed very adamantly and consistently.
Yeah, and you're right. And one of the most important things that you can do that everybody laughs at me and says that I'm being overly whatever about is every time you speak to somebody, write down their agent, that agent name and agent like identifier, and what time you spoke to them and what they said. And even better, if you're in a single consent state of recording, if you can record that call, and if you're not in a single consent state, that you ask for that, you let them know that it's being recorded so that you can call. Because especially certain servicers that I'll stay away from naming names because gosh, what libel is written, but whatever the spoken version of libel is, I don't want to get them mad at me. Certain servicers don't know their left elbow from their right elbow, and so, but if you are able to present them, well, John, ID number 1234 told me this on 10 a.m. on Tuesday. They do honor that to give them the credit where credit's due. So you've got to follow up. When you get back and you fax that, your very first call is going to be the follow-up of, did you receive this? They will either say yes or no. That's your number one question. But then secondly, what you need to do is you need to say, okay, I would like to request a copy of the most current note document that you guys have on file, as well as the escrow information, okay? So you need to talk to the escrow department. 5A I'm going to put here because it's kind of part of that first call. No, it's separate. I'm going to make it 6. Follow up. And you need to did you get the fax? And talk to escrow department and get a copy of the most recent escrow analysis. I think that's going to go over to me. Get the copy of the most recent escrow analysis. And then you're going to need to talk to the whichever department has the note. You need the most recent note available. And if you did not get a recent mortgage statement, then you need a recent mortgage statement. But this can be bypassed. A lot of this stuff actually can be done. I should have mentioned this. At this stage where you're up here getting the verbal authorization, I typically encourage you to get their online login stuff. If they don't have like their other bank accounts linked to it, ask them like, hey, is this linked? Do you have an online login for this? They say yes. Say, is it linked to your other bank accounts, or is it just you log in and all you see is this loan? They log in and all they see is this loan. Get the online login information, and a lot of this stuff you can get taken care of just online, just by downloading the forms on there. So this is only like if you're not able to get that. So you need to get those things because of exactly what Daniel said. We want to verify that you are taking over on a loan that is fully amortized. It doesn't have a balloon coming up, doesn't have an arm, because they may show you a note and deed of trust, but it might have been before a loan modification, right? Your seller may show you a note and deed of trust and then have done a loan modification last year that you're not seeing. So you get it straight from the horse's mouth. And at that point in time, that's when you look at that stuff and say, does this match up with everything that I thought I was getting into? And if so, cool. If not, there's some caveats in the contract that address that. And so you need to address it. And then it's time to go to closing. Now you're just ready to wait for closing, right? So you have, and I didn't put this because it's kind of an obvious part of real estate, but when you get signed contracts, you can wait till step 6, but I would typically, if you are fairly confident in getting this thing done, and especially if you're on a short leash time-wise, immediately on leaving that appointment, you need to send that contract over to your title company and get title opened, right? So if we're going to say that you had a longer period of time available to you and you wanted to see, you thought something might be fishy, so you wanted to see everything was fine at the bank. So we're going to open title, which means that you are sending the purchase agreement that you have to your closing settlement agent and saying, I would like to get title opened on this. I typically do not buy a title policy. However, I will always get a title run done or an abstract of title done. I want to make sure that even though I'm not paying for the insurance, I want to make sure that this seller has the right to sell to me. And so this is typically going to take around 1 week, oftentimes sooner, to get that. And you need to hear from your attorney, yes, this person has no other liens other than what is disclosed on the contract, so you should be good to go. Then it's a matter of waiting for the closing date. That either happens because you found a buyer or whatever that is. We're not going to go into that. We're not going to talk about the option period, finding a buyer, that kind of stuff. That complicates too much. We're just doing a straight, I'm going to buy this thing sub-2 regardless of what else is happening. So now you're waiting on the closing. Then you go to closing. And at closing, you need to make sure that you got your signed power of attorney, because now your next step is to actually use that, okay? Now, even if you got it signed POA, if you got it initially, go ahead and fax it in with the authorization release, get them both faxed in at the same time. If you did not, you need to make sure that you have it at this stage because you're going to close on your deal, and then immediately after that, you're going to fax the POA to the bank, okay? And again, follow up, make sure that it's in. As soon as it's in, you're going to, you know what, I'm sorry, I need to insert a piece in here about insurance. I should have inserted in here. I'll go back and do that. I'm gonna do this like this. Around 1 week, 8 really is decide on insurance. Okay. Now I recommend personally, what we do is when we are buying a property like Sub2, if I plan to sell it, it's going to be vacant for a little while. I plan to sell it as a wrap. What I'm doing here is I'm doing a builder's risk policy that I am not sending to the bank. Okay, we're just doing a fully earned builder's risk that I'm not sending. I'm not getting it submitted to the bank to replace the insurance escrow on that. But we actually might want to talk about the same thing next week, but on the sale side, on the disposition side, because that's when we're actually going to be submitting this into the to the bank. So I don't know if that would be useful to you guys. Drop a comment. I'm sorry?
Next week, you want to talk about insuring?
Next week, I'm thinking about doing the same kind of thing, but on the dispo side, because we've talked about acquisition today. And so next week, we can talk about disposition, selling with owner financing, and how you handle a wraparound of a Sub2 mortgage with the what to do when on that.
I got you.
Kind of similar stuff. And so, you know, if, say, for instance, you were going to take this thing down and you're not going to turn around and sell it with a wrap. Let's say that you're going to turn around and rent it for a while. Well, that means you need long-term insurance in play. So you wouldn't be doing the builder's risk like I do. You might be doing a long-term policy of which you'll need to go watch on the Propelio Academy, my sections on insurance, the James Jenkins insurance stuff on the creativecashflow.com Academy. We've got some exclusive insurance stuff to get it filled out the right way. But now in step 10, when we faxed this power of attorney to the bank, we need to follow up and make sure that that power of attorney has been accepted. And when it has been accepted, these are the things that we're going to do next. We are going to change the mailing address. Okay. We're going to change that to your mailing address so that from now on, the mortgage statements and communications are being sent directly to you. That way you're not risking the seller throwing something important away, like a due on sale clause or like an annual escrow analysis or something like that. So you're going to change the mailing address. You're going to ensure that the correct insurance policy is in place. Okay, so that may or may not mean that there's a change. If you're holding it long term, there will be a change. So we're going to ensure that it's in escrow. So I'm going to go down the example of, hey, you're going to hold it for a rental, or you already have your buyer and you're getting it submitted here. Once you talk to their escrow department and you ensure that the correct insurance policy is in place, because we're doing a new insurance policy that has to be with all the right names and all the right places. Watch the videos on that. And we're going to remove the old insurance policy from escrow. You also want to request an escrow analysis. Okay. What this is going to do is that's going to change the payment that is being expected at the bank to be reflective of this most recent accurate insurance policy that you now have in place in escrow. Otherwise, the escrow account would be collecting based on your seller's annual insurance rate, which may be higher or lower than your new insurance policy that your buyer has or that you got as a landlord or whatever that might be, which means that your cash flow would be wrong until the bank runs the escrow analysis. But you get the right to run an escrow analysis by request at any point in time. So you immediately upon closing, change the mailing address, make sure that the correct insurance is in place on your escrow, and then you request an escrow analysis to make sure that the bank is collecting enough money, the correct amount of money for escrow, and then you start making money. That's step 12, is make that money, honey. That is where we end up. You're now basically good to go for another year. Until the next escrow analysis is run, you are set up because at the point in time that the next escrow analysis is run, your bank is going to be collecting another a change of escrow, and you just want to make sure that your escrow analysis is being run within a month or so of the bank's escrow analysis so that you don't have a difference in what's being collected from your buyer or what's being sent to your seller's bank. But there you go. That's the steps on taking a house down 1, 2, 3, 4. Does that, how do you feel about that, Daniel?
Man, I think that was great. We've had a fairly consistent 100 people or so watching the whole time between all of the different channels. We've got a lot of people watching. I'm not seeing a lot of comments come through, but considering we've got so many people watching, I'm assuming they're just hyper engaged with the content, and because of that, they're pretty much, how would you say that, tunnel vision on listening to what you got to say, because you're putting a lot of information out there. So for everybody that is watching right now and getting value out of what you've seen, could you please drop in there, if nothing else, just a thumbs up or something like that in the comments to say, hey Grant, I heard what you had to say, I appreciate it. If this was a little over your heads, put that in the comments so that way we know, where to keep the content level at. If this was something that you were just leaving on in the background because you were bored, put that too. I mean, give us some feedback as to what happened here, because with the amount of people we've had watching, we don't have as many comments. So I'd like to get feedback from each and every one of y'all, what y'all did or did not like about this show, and how we could improve the content to make sure that we are serving the best needs of the people out there right now. So all of that to be said, like, I learned a lot going through watching this with you, Grant, and I appreciate everything that you've done on that side. I've seen a lot of people out there as well showing their love. So to leave it out there, where should we go next? Like, where are we at on this, Grant? Like,
I think
next week
we've got a couple of questions here that I think are worth addressing. So I appreciate people dropping these questions in, because it is important. And to a certain degree, I understand. Like, this is a very just let me tell you what to happen kind of session. So it makes sense for the questions to be a little bit lower. But we want to make sure, like Daniel said, nothing is more important to us than helping you get to that next level, whatever that might be. So we always want to have that feedback so we know how to best serve you. Angel in YouTube dropped out and said, how does changing the mailing address and your LLC calling the bank not make the bank trigger a due on sale clause? Like, what other instance is this going to happen unless the person is selling? And the biggest and most common instance is going to be like a property management company taking over on it, right? Like that same thing would happen with a property management company. But the ultimate answer here is that the bank doesn't really care. The bank wants money every month, right? Like, so changing the mailing address doesn't mean anything, because maybe, that's going to happen all the time. Like, I have my mortgage statements go to my office, and I've changed it to my office, and then I've changed it to my new house. And, like for mortgage statements that I have on my own side. So like the change of address isn't going to be a big deal. The LLC being authorized to talk to them, we're presenting ourselves as managing the account, which we are. That's an accurate description. So it's just not something that's historically been an issue for us. Another question that comes in from Geraldo: what's both of your guys' opinion on kitchen table closings, where you prepare all your docs and just bring a mobile notary to do the closing at a seller's house? In Texas, that's illegal, basically. So that's my opinion on that, is you can't prepare your own docs for a closing. There's case law that goes up against that, and I can provide that case law for you, but it's not wise. You need your docs to be prepared by an attorney. Now, if the attorney prepares those docs and then you go through and get it signed with the mobile notary, that's totally cool. Or if you prepare the docs and get them signed off on by your attorney, who has looked over them and said, hey, this is what we would do, then that's fine too. But if you prepare your own docs and you get it closed, you're setting yourself up for a world of hurt. It's considered practicing law without a license. So don't do that. So that would be I don't know. I mean, Daniel, do you have another take on that? I don't know that I left room for another take to be had.
No, I mean, on that side, that's about all I don't have anything additional to say to that. I mean, I'm on line with you on that.
We did get a question from Sean about, what if the due on sale clause is triggered? What happens to my loan and the property? I would recommend, Sean, you go back 2 weeks ago. We did a full episode on due on sale clause that's going to answer those kinds of questions for you. And then YouTube go get us as absorbing. This is genius. Thank you both, and Propelio staff. That's awesome. Thank you guys for being here. So, I'll put it up there. I'll put it out there. We can do something similar next week. It's going to be, it's basically the same exact steps for the most part with Dispo. But if that's something that you guys would like to see, drop that in the comments, make a request for it. We can make that our next week's episode if Daniel agrees that would be something that's useful for you. And again, we just love having you guys here. If you guys have not already gone to propelio.com and signed up for that, keep in mind that that's the reason all of this stuff is going down, is that propelio.com has done an incredible job of making sure that great information is being put in front of you guys, as well as a great product for actually doing real estate investing. You've got your CRM, you've got your leads lists that are phenomenal. You've got, just websites, everything, including the Propelio Academy of free information. So you guys, reward them for putting such a huge effort into building this community. Where else do you have a community as tightly knit and as strong and as willing to help each other as the Propelio community is? So check out propelio.com and see if that would be a service that fits your business, because I guarantee you it is. If you're in real estate investing, you need what they're doing for you there. And, similarly, if you like how I teach, if you like the experiences that I have, reach out to me. We actually have a mastermind coming up this weekend that we're giving away some pretty stellar stuff that I don't want to speak. I'll tell you on the interview if you apply at creativecashflow.com/memberships, but I'm trying to keep some of this stuff on the hush because I want my current members to be pleasantly surprised by everything that we are giving away on Friday. So, but it's going to be huge. We're going to be talking about, it's basically a what to do when. It's kind of a larger view version of what we did today, of where we're spending the entire mastermind with realizing, I think something that somebody said earlier today in the comments, if I can find what that comment was, but it's exactly what we're talking about at the mastermind, is because somebody mentioned something along the lines of, hey, I've got this kind of like intellectual knowledge, but what is the actual practical, like, where do we go about doing that? And that's what we're talking about at this mastermind is how to build a business, how to, okay, so how Sub2 works, but how do you wake up in the morning? What is the first thing that you're going to do to make sure that you're getting consistent results? Because that's the biggest problem that we've seen in current real estate state, is that people are not getting consistent results. And the bigger problem behind that is that they don't have an accurate and good setup for replicating successful results to know what to do when. So that's what we're talking about is building your business, systemization, prioritization. What does a day in the life of acquisitions look like? Transaction coordination, all that kind of stuff. And then we've got some pretty major giveaways that we're doing there. So if you're interested, creativecashflow.com/memberships, hit apply there for the accelerator or executives program, and you'll get in for this mastermind. And because of COVID-19, we are actually adding a quarter to everybody's membership that gets in before this mastermind. So you're actually getting a full an additional mastermind and quarter to what you see listed out on that memberships page. So I encourage you to check that out. Anything that you want to throw out there, Daniel?
No, man, I'm doing good. I appreciate everybody that's tuned in, that has been on this. I truly appreciate you, Grant, for always giving back to this community. On my side, I just thank each and every single one of y'all. Thank you, Grant. And I don't really have much else to put in on this one, man. If you're ready to wrap it up, let's wrap it up.
Yep, I'm ready to go. So thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate being able to be part of your life for an hour and a half on a Wednesday morning. So thank you for giving that to us, and hopefully you are getting great value from us. So don't forget to subscribe to Propelio's notifications, and be here next week, same time, 11 a.m. Central, for Grant Teach Me Something, where we will go over some more topics to remove obstacles between you and success.
Well, awesome. Thank you, guys, and y'all have a great one.